changed a little bit our title because I thought it would be easier for you to find yourselves in the fact that the sea sets different scenes for different people, because the sea is what connects us, no? So we have our different perceptions, our different countries, and this is the spirit of this session. We wanted to bring about people who are interested in the sea, and with different scientific issues that raise also social and psychological issues that we can ask and we can delve on. And just as a starter, as a frame for our because we have a very large number of participants in this session. It's a very rich session, and I wanted just to frame it and what is our common vision for how we see perception, how we perceive things, and how in psychology and risk analysis we have studied and we have understood some of these questions. Okay, so I'll give you some key concepts to start with. Sorry, I didn't present myself. I'm Raquel Bertoldo, and I'm a social psychologist who works with environmental issues and risk perception and environmental psychology in Marseille, in ex-Marseille. Okay. So, why is it important to talk and discuss risk perception? Actually, when we behave, and this is the main thing of psychology, is how people behave, because this is the matter of how people do. No? So we act, and in doing so, we react to the things that are around us that we see. However, this reality that guides us behaviors, it's not common for everyone. So if I show you the image of this apple, for example, you are, for some people, you're familiar with this idea of this work of art from Matisse, where some of you will say, well, this is an apple. However, ce n'est pas une pomme. Huh? It's an image, it's the image of an apple. And this is the problem that lots of people confuse when you give information for people. Well, it's not the thing, you know, it's an image. And this image, it can be a little bit tricked. So here's where I'm showing you all these lines, they're really parallel. But everyone, people with different perceptions, with different perspectives, different histories, they all see different things over there. So this is what I wanted to keep you, that you keep in mind. The perception, it can be very deceiving sometimes. And this is why I wanted to make a very clear distinction here between perception as an individual process and perceptions as a collective one. When we're talking about an individual process, so you have one person who has different, I myself, I see things with my visions, but people, when they are collectively working together, we talk about other types of processes, and I wanted to very clearly distinguish these two. It's important for us this morning. For example, when we're talking about perception, first you have the stimulus. This stimulus that exists outside us, outside ourselves, it comes to your senses, okay? And it's the knowledge and the representations and the culture that will give you the frame for what you perceive. Okay? So it's important to keep in mind that this is socially shared. This is socially constructed from the point of view of our institutions, of our established ways of living. And this will be the frame for what we perceive as individuals. But this is social, okay? So I wanted to start with a couple of key ideas of perception. So we know as a perception as an individual process. It varies in common ways because we're all human beings, right? We do have different cultures, but we share some common traits, common functionings. So these common ways of functioning, they have been explored extensively, and we know, for example, that people tend to see more risks in very catastrophic events, and this is the idea that was analyzed and developed by Slovak. People tend to fear more very catastrophic events and fear less things that are normal, that are familiar. They also fear more things that are unknown, that are less known to science, and that are less known to them, and they don't have very immediate effects. In comparison to things that are very familiar, that are very common, that have a very immediate effect. Okay? So this is something that we have known for a long time. Another thing that's important to add to this, to the basic and the common ways that vary, that influence our perceptions, are the biases. So this is another process, another thing that has been described in very different and widely different cultures, and we see that people overall tend to be very optimistic. Okay, so overall, over cultures, etc. So this is what we call the optimism bias. The optimism bias is something like, here we are in a seismic place, for example, and we'll probably think, well, it's not hitting right away, or not this year, you know. So we tend to be very optimistic about this type of things. Another bias that have been very well described is the confirmation bias, where we tend to analyze and interpret our realities based on what we already know. And very often, things that happen around us, they don't fit exactly our common mainframes or scientific information. But we distort them a little bit so that they fit, you know, that they fit our expectations and our explanations. So these are always things that tend to reduce our perception of how our environment works. But this is shared. This is this has been confirmed by studies all over the world. And then there is another bias, another thing that has been very widely described. That's the psychological distance. There are some of the presentations that we'll see here in this morning, in particular the ocean, about the deep sea, that talks a lot about the fact that things that tend to be very far from us are thought in a very abstract way. So the more things are far away, the more things are far away in time, in space, and in probability as well. They're thought in a very, very abstract way, and they don't frighten us as much because we don't think that they matter to us as much. And if we're talking about things that are closer to us, they're more probable, and that they are more closer in time and in space, we'll think about them in a concrete manner. So that's why, for example, Fanny will talk a little bit more about this issue of the psychological distance. So all these biases and ways of thinking that I'm describing here, these are things that are common. However, it's very important, and this is a social psychologist I'm very attentive to, I'm not talking about this one. However, the cultures, they are very different. We do have some common ways of varying together, but we also have different senses and different institutions in different countries. And this counts a lot. This is why all the literature that I presented to you about the psychological distance and psychological biases. Now I'm talking more about frames and theories that are in a more sociological level. Okay? So I'm talking about collective meaning. So this is why Joffé and other colleagues that are interested in social representations, when we talk and we try to understand and describe risk and risk perception, for them, it becomes more important to understand the meaning behind the things that we see. For example, when we're talking about an earthquake or a volcano, etc., how a culture gives meaning to this and how past experiences are remembered, which are the triggers that we can find also in our everyday lives that bring about all these reflections. So this is why here a shared reality, a very common and important point here is that for people like myself and other people from social sciences, very often we don't work with reality per se. Maybe that's why my PowerPoints don't have that much image as those that you will see afterwards. But we work a lot with shared and constructed social realities. This is something very different from of the work that I see you guys doing here. We tend to, so in social sciences very often we say that things that exist for people, we see that they exist because we see other people believing in it. A very good example of this is the value of money. Okay, this is a good example that I give to my students. The money you can't eat, you can do anything with it. Yet, it regulates everything around us. And its power comes from our shared belief that's in its worth. So the fact that we agree that it has value means that it has value. This is the foundation of what I'm talking when I say social reality and constructed social realities, because we believe in a thing that we see other people believe as well. So this is the importance of this. And when you see, we can very clearly identify this type of processes when you see people healing or in collective trauma or in social history about catastrophic events. We see this shared reality taking place. Another common, I'm talking about points and theories that have been interesting in these matters. A very interesting aspect of social analysis that's it's worth mentioning is social contagion as well. When we're dealing with this kind of stuff, very often people are influenced by what other people think in risk perception. Can you remind yourselves, maybe, do you remember the early days of COVID when we didn't know much about it? But I can tell you from my experience, I just started to feel fear when I saw the people frightened around me. So it wasn't only the information, it wasn't the international reports, it was when around me I've seen people were freaking out and wearing masks and distancing themselves. That's when it became real. And when we're talking about social contagion, this is the type of thing. People will go along and we guide our behavior based on the behavior of people that we see around us. So this is when the idea of social contagion that I believe some of you maybe will talk about. This is just to keep in mind for the presentations that are coming afterwards. So what in risk analysis and in risk management, I've presented to you some key ideas that come from psychology that are very used in risk analysis, but risk analysis has delved into other processes that are also of key importance, because here I talk to you about individual perception, social perception, but there is another very important point here, that's the power and the role of stakeholders and collectivities that exist in a territory. And when we see all the cycle of information and information of people and perception, some key learnings and key aspects of this process we can summarize in trust in authorities, in science, and scientific methods. Here you can see the complotist ideas, they thrive in a moment where trust in science and trust in institutions, they are a little bit sketchy, or they're not very strong. Emotions too, they have been very widely analyzed in relation to how people behave individually and collectively. Especially, for example, things like fatalism. When people feel like they can do anything, they will not do. So this is the type of things that have been thoroughly studied. Then we have other types of processes like place attachment that have been largely associated with risk as a lower risk perception. Information and knowledge, and another variable that's very important, it's the past experience with a threat or with a catastrophe and with a risk. So that's the key ideas that I wanted to make for you. Oh, sorry, I came back. And now we'll start to see our colleagues who will talk about all these things. And we've organized this session in a way that will start with people who are talking about risks and science, society issues in the coast. So here we'll see the presentation of Francesco Chiocci, Boumediene Belladine, and Christian Gorini. And we'll start with Francesco. And then we'll have other presentations that will talk about the sea, the marine bioinventions, marine and human health, and we'll finish with this deep sea. So we'll start in the coast, and we're going to dive in the deep sea. Thank you. Another information, because we're organizing this session by presenters. Keep your questions for each block of presentations. So when we'll have here this first block of presenters, we'll stop and let you guys ask questions. That sounds fine for you? Yeah? Okay. So let's start with Francesco. Thank you.